I'd love to invite Christina to the stage. Christina is the co-founder and COO of Knowtions Research, which is an AI company that's trying to make health and insurance data useful through predictive insights. And Christina focuses on building culture around a strong team of interdisciplinary experts to transform the intersection of two complex businesses, insurance and healthcare, which I think you'd all agree both sort of need to be disrupted. So really exciting space. Couple of fun facts. Christina used to unicycle, but she traded it in for longboarding. So two very interesting things, pretty cool. And she's the office champion of Settlers of Catan. So she's got that nerdy side and that cool adventurous side. So that's like the perfect thing you want everyone to have. So I think this will be pretty interesting. Welcome, Christina.
Thank you so much for having me today. Everyone is welcome to come challenge me for Settlers of Catan in our office. We have about bi-monthly actually board game nights, and it's like a mandatory thing to battle me when you come work at Knowtions. So that's kind of our thing. And today, moving this way. And today, what I wanted to take the time to do is share from the perspective of an early stage enterprise AI startups perspective, some of our battle scars. So for us, like was mentioned earlier, we're a AI company that does risk predictions for health insurance companies. Now we're early stage. We just wrapped up our Series A funding late last year, actually, with Information Venture Partners and Alibaba. So really, this talk is all going to be designed for other fellow founders in the audience who are at the early stage level, kind of looking forward. Okay, what's that picture going to look like? How am I going to actually move from A to B to C and D? And actually, it's like a David and Goliath when you're a small startup looking at this huge enterprise. So one thing that I want to start with is, at our office, you'll hear this a lot. Hooray, big company wants to pilot us. But why is this the beginning of like many startup horror stories? Why is that the case? So for us, we've been there a couple of times where we won the innovation challenge. We're very lucky that most of them were paid pilots. And you know what? Enterprises are getting really, really, really good at improving their innovation efficiency. We heard in the community talks that BMO is doing something with the DMZ lab to bring innovations in. Most of large enterprises today now had advanced analytics labs or some sort of innovation lab. And you know what? Most of these companies have a structured process of being able to adopt these innovative technologies in. All right. But really, you know, the reality or the monster hiding under the bed is that you get this really exciting pilot. You're able to write a fantastic investor update. Everybody is pumped. Your team is like, wow, I know this company that we're now serving. Everybody's excited. You finish this pilot, and how many of them actually make it into a real life production environment? And for fellow founders in the audience who have been in our spot, honestly, we've been in this spot more times than we care to admit, where we did a successful pilot and we'll get the response of, oh, you know what, like changing priorities, or there's been an internal stakeholder shift, or we don't have budget for you, or some like one thing or another, like things inevitably will go wrong. And for us, today what I want to share is a really tactical, super high level guide on, you know what, where did we go wrong? These are really, honestly, from the bottom of my heart, some of our battle scars. So for us, I like to call it the poor startup survival guide, because the reality is we're all resource strapped at the early stage. And having poured in 6 to 8 months to pursue a enterprise client and have them fall through like that, the reality that we each face is that our pipelines, they're not huge, because at the early stage, you probably have one co-founder, maybe supported by 2 or 3 guys trying to go after these accounts. So really, this is for us. This is the tactical for us that we learned the hard way. So the first point of this is, whose profit and loss do you belong to? Now, we're very lucky that we actually had the recently retired CIO of MetLife, Tom Wolf, join our board as part of our Series A. And he actually did an entire afternoon session on this, because it's just one of those things that, as you know, early stage or first time founders, it seems obvious, but it's actually not. You want to know whose profit and loss you belong to. And by that, all that means is that within an enterprise, each department actually has has someone that runs their own profit and losses. So what you're trying to determine is whether your product is revenue generating or cost saving for that specific department that you're actually serving. So the assumption that we made very early on, that was a really rookie assumption that hurt us pretty badly, was that the stakeholder that we most wanted to serve was the advanced analytics team or the IT department or whatnot. But what we really learned is that, look, IT costs are actually what are known as recovered. So what that means is that IT departments actually charge back their costs to the departments themselves. So if you don't know who that bloody department is, and you think your stakeholder is the IT department, you're gonna have a really hard time. Been there, done that, like battle scars right here kind of situation, right? So that's really the first point. The second point is really whose KPI do you actually impact? And by analytics team, and especially for enterprise startups, is really interesting because most of the times we're really brought into the enterprise by the advanced analytics or the innovation team or something like that. And it becomes this thing where analytics teams are spread across the organization. You kind of have to understand, are they defensive or are they offensive? And all that means is that, look, if it's the chief marketing officer who's running the analytics department and this is kind of their niche, it's probably going to be offensive. And if you want to fit in there, you better be revenue generating or else nobody wants to talk to you. And if they do talk to you, it's a waste of your time. You shouldn't be pouring resources there. And the final thing is really like, you're going to implement a product. You're going to change some things with your predictions, with whatever it is you're doing. Like, whose KPIs are you impacting? Whose life are you going to make actually harder? In our example, what ended up happening was the advanced analytics team actually wanted different things from the claims process team. Like, we provide predictions, and advanced analytics is give us everything, and the claims processing is saying don't give me that much information because you're going to screw me up and actually make me slower than I was before. So it's understanding what that picture actually looks like. And if you have disagreements on KPIs or KPIs are outdated and need to change, you gotta have those conversations early, often, and iterate on top of that. Because if you don't have them, then it relates back to the first question, which is you're never gonna get the people who you need to pay for your product to actually pay for it. We've also been there and made that mistake as well, and it's very painful. And lastly, I think this is something as technologists, which is where we started, we forget a lot of the times is, you know what, we're fintechs, we serve, especially for B2B and enterprise, we serve these huge giant companies where, you know what, they've been managing trillions and trillions of dollars without, like, with some problems, but fine, before you for a very, 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 very long time. So it's a humbling experience in that we need to learn and I keep telling my team this, what is the 5% that you do 100 times better and they can't do internally to drive the 10x value? And if you understand that, you'll really truly understand where you fit in the greater scope of things so that we can really change the quote to, hooray, this big company is deploying us. Thank you, everyone.
That was good. That was great. Let's go to the audience for some questions. But first, I'm going to selfishly ask, do you prioritize development cards in the early game?
Development
Catan.
Catan? Oh, you know what's interesting? So I play with a lot of our interns coming in, and I realized that their strategies and how they play Catan actually reflects on how they work, right? So maybe one day it'll be like part of our interview process. No, it's like you get to understand how they think about strategy, what happens when their preferred locations are taken, what happens when something bad happens, what happens when you get blocked, what happens when you do this. It's like a super quick and like people don't know you're actually like, you know, evaluating it, but when you play enough, you kind of understand what that game looks like. So,
very cool. Very cool.
So, question about your company. From what I understand, you have some overseas clients or customers,
correct.
And I don't know if you have any Canadian ones. Based in Canada, how did you get your first overseas customers without having a local logo as proof that you actually do what you say you do?
That's a really good question. So the way that we went around this is actually goes back to the first one, which is understanding the P&L. In that we did start with the North American head office, and they basically said, look, like here's the innovation buckets. The buckets of money are actually in Asia. I need you to go. They're moving a lot faster than us. I need you to go to Asia and prove value there, and then we'll see how we're going to bring you back. So once that ball got rolling, then it just kind of snowballed and snowballed and snowballed. So that's how we initially started. Sorry, I'm just getting over.
Hi. So what's the process you follow to understand these big, large enterprise corporate structures, especially if you say it's important to understand it earlier on in the process, and it seems that you would need to kind of know the corporate structure, even maybe the kind of politics of who has the power or the decision-making abilities within the organization. So what's the process that you guys would follow to get that information earlier in the process?
Right, so that's a really good question. So so the process that we generally go through is this stakeholder mapping process. So, the start for many startups nowadays is in the advanced analytics and innovation department. So you go there, your first job is to figure out, okay, so it's actually their job as well. So meet them halfway, figure out where your business unit is, and then within that business unit, figure out kind of who the stakeholders then is. And it's sometimes not as obvious as you would like. And many times our stakeholder charts end up like department across departments. There's actually cross departments things happening. And you kind of understand, okay, who's the one holding the budget? Where are what we like to call pressure points? Because your deal will inevitably face challenges. Inevitably, you're gonna have someone who doesn't actually have the decision-making power, hate on your product, slow it down, and that's bad for you. And you need to understand what to do when that situation happens, which pressure points to push on, right? So it's kind of like in the sales process, you kind of learn to ask the right questions, learn to kind of map out the relationships and whatnot. And sometimes you have to go indirectly in terms of trying to determine where it is. But in terms of our stakeholder maps get quite complicated depending on actually all of them are really complicated, yeah.
Hey, Christina.
Yes.
This is Andy speaking. Really appreciate you sharing your story, because most entrepreneurs only talk about like the glory side of starting a business, but I really appreciate you talk about your battle scars.
Battle scars.
Yeah. I'm just curious, like, of all the business ideas that you could have started, why pick this? Because this sounds like a really niche area. So how did you get the knowledge to start, and what made you get started?
So that's a really good question that I'm going to be here for another 7 minutes and we can talk about afterwards, because it was not a straightforward A to B. Some companies that they start from A to B. For us, it was possibly one of the most long-winded ways where it was not, there's just like too many battle scars. Like I'll be here forever talking about it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. That was really great.